Hello, I'm Bernard Hickey from interest.co.nz and welcome to a special housing report brought to you in association with the Bank of New Zealand, where today we look at figures from quotable value on house values in New Zealand in the 3 months to October from the same period a year ago. And those values across the nation are up 1.2% from a year ago. And quotable value says that the gradual rise in house values over recent months has continued. It says now that the rise in values in Auckland, particularly central Auckland, and Christchurch in recent months has really started to spread out now through the rest of the country. Now when you look at Auckland prices there and values, they're up around 3.8% from a year ago. And Christchurch is doing relatively well, in part because many houses have been damaged and those houses that are selling, their values are increasing. And when you look at Christchurch prices, they're up around about 3.5% from a year ago. Now quotable value figures are slightly different to the ones you might hear from others, in particular the Real Estate Institute of New Zealand. Quotable value looks at the values of properties in certain areas versus the same values a year ago. And they look at house prices for similar houses in those areas and they make sure they compare like with like. But I also look at values over the last 3-month period, and what happens is that those valuations tend to be slightly later than the numbers for the Real Estate Institute, which looks purely at median house prices in that particular month from the previous month and a year ago. So there's lots of different measures of house prices and house values, but the quotable value ones are seen as the less volatile ones and more likely to be like for like than what we see from the Real Estate Institute, which are quite volatile, up to date, but can be skewed somewhat by big shifts in what types of houses are being sold. For example, if you had lots of expensive houses selling, then that could skew the median up. Now let's look in more detail at what's happening through the country. Now in Auckland, we've seen prices rise in central Auckland quite a bit in recent months, and in particular when you look at the numbers from Barfoot and Thompson, which is the biggest real estate agency chain, their numbers for October show prices in central Auckland and in the eastern suburbs up 15% from a year ago. There's something special going on in central Auckland. Obviously a lack of new supply, not many houses being built. Currently New Zealand is building around 10 to 15,000 houses a year at the moment. That's about half what it was during the peak of the housing boom, and some people think you need around 20 to 25,000 houses a year to make sure that supply keeps up with demand. It's a particular issue in Auckland because we've got the leaky building crisis, which has wiped out a generation of housing, and because most migrants from overseas and from the rest of the country tend to come to Auckland. But quotable value is saying that we're starting to see prices leak out, spread out through the rest of the country now, and even Wellington, where public service cuts have had an effect on house prices, even Wellington prices are up a little bit in the last few months. And of course through the rest of the South Island, the Christchurch earthquake impact is starting to flow through into higher prices there. So there we have it, the quotable value report for October, showing prices up 1.2% from a year ago. Obviously the housing market is moving. Some would say because interest rates are so low, and the outlook for interest rates is that they stay low into the middle of next year, but also because we have a lack of new housing supply coming on in the market. I'm Bernard Hickey. That was a special housing report brought to you in association with Bank of New Zealand.